the British have never come to terms with the sins of their forebears in the way that the Germans have come to terms with what the Nazis did. I think it's in a very, very different situation. The political situation today is we have a more centralized, more unified India than we've had for many centuries. The period I'm writing about is the very opposite. It's when the center gives way and breaks up and the whole of India shatters into 1,000 fragments. Those pieces that the East India Company hoovers up. Well, I think nothing that would surprise anyone in India. For English readers, I think the shadiness of the company and the looting and the plundering and the asset stripping is news to them. In a sense, Indian nationalist historiography was very clear and outspoken about the drain of wealth and the way that the company plundered the riches of particularly Mughal Bengal in the 18th century and the degree to which the most prosperous region in India got turned into a dust bowl by the famine of 1770. In a sense, the biggest surprise was the opposite, how much opposition and resistance there was from the English public to this. It was a cause of great scandal in the 18th century that India was being controlled by a boardroom in the city of London, and that when news of the 1770 famine came, it's the headline in every paper. It's said at the time 5 million Bengalis had died in the famine. You know, there are plays on in the Haymarket Theatre with Clive being parodied as Lord Vulture. It's very difficult to do these counterfactuals and to say, you know, if the company hadn't existed, what would have happened? I suppose the most likely outcome would have been the dominance of the Marathas, but there were many other options, such as, for example, the French East India Company, who probably would have been more likely to have taken over if it wasn't for the British one. So my family was exactly the sort of family that went into the East India Company. It was never the grand senior gentry, it was never the dukes and the lords and so on, because it was terribly risky. 3/4 of the young men that went out to India never came back. And so the likelihood was that you were sending a family member off to his death when you sent him out to India. Mainly from disease, not from battles. But my family were exactly the sort of family that joined the company. They were minor Scottish gentry with aspirations above their pockets, and generations of younger sons got sent out. One of the first being Dalrymple, who had all sorts of grand ideas but ended up dying in the Black Hole, and his name is on the Black Hole Memorial now in St. John's Churchyard in Calcutta. Every generation of my family sent someone out here, which is why, in a sense, I'm so interested in this, because it is, in a sense, my story too. And there was one, James Dalrymple in Hyderabad, who married the great-granddaughter of Nur Jahan's youngest sister, Muti Begum. There's another Dalrymple who marries an Anglo-Indian girl in Chandanagar in Bengal. So I've got a trickle of Mughal and a trickle of Bengali blood in my veins. It's a really complicated question whether the British contributed to the communal divide in the country. There's certainly no question that they exacerbated it, and you find very conscious efforts by the Victorians to show what they saw as the tyranny of Mughal rule and to try and doctor history to make British rule seem like a liberation from tyranny. But I think you can also go too far in the opposite direction, as you know, arguably some Nehruvian historians did after independence, and to create a paradise like India where all religious communities got on perfectly well. There were never any religious divides or any communal tension of any sort. So there were two things that really threatened the company. One was the military power of Indians after 1780, when the sort of techniques that the company imported, infantry squares, socket bayonets, horse artillery with elevating screws, all these military innovations of the 18th century gave the company an edge over its Indian rivals, such as Tipu and the Marathas. And by 1780, both Tipu and the Marathas had got this technology too, and there was a kind of military parity. So what in the end gave the British their edge was the fact that because they were a multinational company, because their shares were like a kind of world reserve currency, and because for all the asset stripping and plundering, they understood the importance of commercial contracts, which could be enforced in courts of law, and for this reason, there was a great deal of collaboration. And the company was first tempted into Indian politics by the Jagat Sets, the Mawari bankers of Murshidabad, incredibly powerful, the richest bankers in India. And thereafter, it was other Hindu bankers, such as the bankers of Hindu bankers of Benares and Patna, who compete to lend the company money. Had the Indian financial community not collaborated enthusiastically with the company, had it cut off funds, history would not have rolled out as it was. The company had continual series of collaborators who smoothed their path. And by the time of the Cornwallis land reforms at the permanent settlement, when the big Mughal estates were broken up and sold to the rising Bhadralok of Calcutta, a whole section of urban Hindu Bengali society basically had an interest in company rule. And made a conscious decision to opt for that as the better option over Mughal or Maratha rule. Well, thankfully there are obviously no companies in the modern era which actually control the sovereign rights of a nation state. We don't have Facebook or Google occupying Switzerland or Indonesia. ExxonMobil, the largest oil producer in the world, is obviously very influential in states where it operates, but it doesn't actually have sovereign control. One of the things I hope to do with this book is to show people, in a sense, how very venal the company was. And the British, obviously like to think the best of their forebears and imagine the Raj to be some wonderful sort of merchant ivory film with crinolines and maharajas and elephants and croquet matches. In the way that the British reduced the incredible riches of Bengal and turned it to poverty is not something that I think they know, and they need to know. They need to know the dark side of their past.